Are you ready?
Yeah. I think so.
Okay, cool. Jennifer and Carl, I am so excited to have you on the Wise Consumer podcast today. I'm really looking forward to our conversation, exploring the journey that led you here and the work you're doing. So thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today.
Yeah, absolutely, Madeline. This is an honor. It's so good to be here with you today.
I'm really stoked about it. Let me go ahead and actually just fix my volumes a bit. Perfect. I want to start off with, normally I start these interviews and I kind of go through the founder stories, what led them here, et cetera, et cetera. But because I want the audience to really understand what Trestle does, because your brand is relatively unique, I thought we would start more with the problems that you're trying to solve and really just jump right in. Like, not going to give you any like fluff. Like, let's just jump right in. And I'd like to start with, I think the first thing to start with that I'd like to start with is conscious consumerism. Like, what does it even mean? I think it's a really loaded word. There's no real definition. It's hard for people. We all have different values. So I will let you take it from there and then I'll put some input. But if you guys could start with what conscious consumerism even means and why it even exists, I think that'd be a great place to start.
Yeah, I think that to start it out, it's kind of one of those words like, sustainability, where it's anybody can define it their own way. And my, I guess, personal definition of what conscious consumerism is more along the fact of being like really being intentional about what you're buying. So everybody has their own preferences, and it comes down to individual products, right? There's sometimes that price is really the main thing that you are looking about. And there's a lot of times that it's like really being intentional about how this really impacts the environment. And so for me, conscious consumerism is really the being intentional and being really conscious on everything that you buy. Is it having the impact? Is it going through what your value sets are, or what is the most important thing in this moment? And if you have that intentionality behind it, that's my personal definition of conscious consumerism. And I think Jennifer expands upon that as well.
Yeah, I think what I would add to that is it's super personal to each person, but for me, what I think it is finding the answers to the question, by whom and what our products are made and where and how.
Yeah.
So just looking at the story behind the product, just not just the features of the product or the service, but what's the story behind it.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think one of the things that I'd like to explore with you guys a little bit today, too, is not only conscious consumerism, the challenges, and the audience will totally get the challenges that we all face when it comes to that. But I think the other flip side is not only are we supposed to be paying attention as to how was something created, who created it, what was the supply chain, where are the materials coming from? I think the average person, as you said in the pie chat, I think it was pie chat, right? I'll link it, everyone. You can watch it. But you say, like, we don't want to go out and be like, oh, yeah, I want to support child labor, or I want to support, deforestation. I don't think we go out with that intention. And millennials, like our generation, really is one of the first generations to be really adamant about it. I think as through the research that I've done, it's like 9 in 10 people will actually pay more for a product if they know that it's being sustainably sourced, ethically created, et cetera, et cetera. The challenge is what they're finding, and this is where Trestle comes in. We all say we want to support these brands, but the challenge is time. Do we have time to research what brands are doing it? Do we have the economics to support some of the brands that are doing it? Or do we have the motivation to support, what these brands are doing? And so I think that's something I'd really love to get your take on. And I know this is like so loaded, and we'll like break it down a little bit, but I just want to like kind of like throw it all out there and like kind of break it down.
Yeah, for sure. So it is really challenging. And I think I heard it stated really well recently when somebody that I was listening to said that really conscious consumerism is a thing for the privileged,
right,
to people who are privileged to have the time to do the research, that have the economics. And I think that we don't identify personally as economically privileged at this point in our lives. And so for us, we want it to be something that is more accessible to someone like us who doesn't have the time, won't take the time whether they want to or not. It's just not within our behavioral practices. We're not used to it, and we don't know how to do it. So, or at least we didn't before we started this journey. We're getting much better at it now. And so it is, you're right. It's a much larger challenge that we're trying to address than just one piece of, oh, we don't have the time. It's not just we don't have the time. It's that the information is convoluted. It's not consistent across brands. Definitions are challenging because nobody uses the same word with the same meaning. And so even if we wanted to, even if we had the best of intentions to learn the story behind a product, we're not going to get consistent information, and it's going to take getting a PhD in research in order to get a full picture and a full understanding.
When I think even to add on top of that, the notion where, you might have learned about good practices, or this company is, treating their employees a certain way, and, we'll probably talk about this later with the greenwashing aspect, but consumers have really become jaded with the marketing and with how companies talk about their own personal values, because more often than not, a report will come out that completely negates everything that company said. Like, yeah, we take care of our employees. We're giving these, factory workers overseas great wages and, everything. And then you hear about a factory fire and it's terrible, and so it's like, what are you really trusting? How can you really know what a company says versus what they actually do? And I think that we as a consumer base are kind of tired and distrusting of that, of really what a company says versus what they actually do. And not to say that a company's intentions are bad, but it's hard, it's just a hard all around problem.
And I think it's really overwhelming. And I think greenwashing, the term, and I'll correct myself if I'm wrong, came from, I had read, Chevron was one in the 1970s were saying like, oh, we're super sustainable. And then behind the scenes, they were doing all this stuff. And a lot of the time, I think what's changed it today is that we have the access. We can go online and look up a brand. We don't have to go, we have more than just magazines and newspapers and the TV to tell us stuff. We have it at our fingertips. And I think brands are being held accountable more now than they ever have before. And I think that's, the point I was getting at to that was like greenwashing. It's not like a new concept. It's just now it's more visible. I think we're asking brands to be transparent. So I think as a consumer, and this is why I love what you guys are doing, it's overwhelming. And I'm speaking for everyone, even someone who like myself, who's nerds out about stuff, it's overwhelming. Like, first of all, I know that maybe this brand is super sustainable and, they're environmentally focused, but maybe their labor, how do I know what their labor practices are? Or, maybe one brand is really great with labor practices, but then they're really not sustainable. So it's really confusing and overwhelming. And what would you say to someone? Well, you could tell me, I guess, like, what would you say to that person who's like, it's really overwhelming to do this, and I don't know if the brand that I want to support, or maybe it's a brand that I've loved for like 20 years, and all of a sudden I find out that they're doing X, Y, or Z that like, I can't really get behind. So what does someone do? What would you say to that person?
That's a good question.
Yeah, first I would just say you're right. It is overwhelming, and your experience is not unique. And I don't know that there's anybody who's mastered this process of really figuring it out. Even us, even the people that have come before us to do similar work, it's not mastered yet. And the system is designed in the favor of consumers to have this information. In fact, I think our online systems especially are moving in, while we do have access to the information more readily, like you said, Madeline, we're moving, the system is moving us to favor more the cheap and the super accessible, super convenient, similar to what big box stores did a couple decades ago. So the way we think about it is, the current online systems are becoming the cyber equivalent of the big box stores. And as a consumer who started to care about some of where our products are coming from and asking those further questions, somebody who might be inclined to boycott a big box store, the online system hasn't resolved itself yet to support that person. So yes, it's still in a state where it's overwhelming for the individual. And that's why I think if we can bring together the individuals who are passionate about this, who do love to nerd out on the research, and get their brains to power a system that makes it easier for the masses, then we might have something really that changes the system so that it's less the cyber equivalent of big box, and it's much more representative of what we really do, how we do want to be spending our dollars in a way that's more authentic to our own values.
Mm-hmm.
And I think to add to that, I would tell that person that it's okay not to be perfect.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You don't have to be the complete saint when you're making everything, because honestly, it's impossible.
Yeah.
And also, I don't think that it's ever going to become a perfect system. And so instead of, feeling complete guilt and complete overwhelmed of the system and the process, and I'm not doing enough, or, how can I really impact the change? It's just encouraging you to be, hey, in this moment, instead of a single-use plastic, maybe bring a bottle or your own thing. It's like just little actions like that over time will make a better system. Mm-hmm. Just little bits, but not being okay with not being perfect, I think, is an okay system with what we have today.
Yeah, perfection is something that I talk about a lot. I think a lot of people strive for perfectionism. There's this whole thing now, like, what is eco-anxiety? And I think a lot of that, there's eco-anxiety like, oh my gosh, the doom and gloom of the future. But there's also eco-anxiety like, oh my gosh, I ordered a drink and there's a straw in it, like, I think it's just important for us to remember that it's okay to not be perfect, like you said. And I think it's okay to take baby steps. And this is why I think Trestle's so great. And we will get to it, you guys. I promise. We're going to get into what Trestle does. But it's just one of those things that it's challenging to do this, but it's not impossible. The other thing that I thought is interesting as we start going into like being a conscious consumer, and we were talking, you mentioned about like, ethical brands and everything like that, is there are sometimes, I think one of the other challenges for people is there are less options out there when it comes to this, maybe this brand is purely ethical. Maybe this brand is purely sustainable and ethical, but they don't have what you want. So I think what I like about what Trestle is doing is that you're helping people see, well, maybe the brand that is ethical and sustainable doesn't have what you want, but there's this other brand that may actually match with that value. So with that being said, let's talk about Trestle finally. What is Trestle, you guys? Explain that to the audience.
Okay. So Trestle is, it's basically our attempt at solving for the problem that we just talked about. So what we do is we aggregate information on how companies operate, and then we create technical tools to interact with consumers while they're shopping at the point that's most important for them. So the tool that we just put out is at the point that you're either doing search or that you're about to make a purchase. And what it does, it's called the myTrestle button. It's now available for download on the Google Chrome store. But it basically, when you go to a company's website, it will instantly show you the values that they operate by, and you can research it. All research is available to you. So if you want to know, you see that they have some environmental practices. Great. What are those? You can see them right there. Okay. Where did you get that information? You can dig as deeply to the source documentation as you want for any piece of data. So what we are as a whole is making sure that the operations that companies use to create the products that we buy are as available to the consumer at the point that they need it the most, so that they don't have to do the research every time they go to buy something. They can have that information so easily accessible when it's important to them. Do you want to add to that?
You said it really well, where we are trying to basically cut that 2 to 4 hours of research, going through, what the company says, really looking out at certification boards, and collecting all that information and create it in a tool that the information is there at the moment you want it. So you don't have to go to another page. You don't have to leave the company. You don't have to always be thinking about those steps that you should take or want to take to really discover what a company is about. And so we're basically shortcutting that in an easy to use tool that is right there in the button. We basically want to make it, quick and easy for you to get a sense of what that company is doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I love that. I really do. I've been playing around with it, and it's awesome. It's just so easy, and I'd love for you guys to explain how does it work. I found it to be extremely easy to use, but go ahead. I'll leave it to the experts to explain how. How does one go about adding the Trestle my button?
First off, thank you for saying it's easy to use. That makes me feel good.
So easy. And I'm sometimes like super technically like illiterate. So
yay. Yeah, so the myTrestle button, it is, like Jennifer was saying, it's on the Google Chrome store. It is for only Google right now. We will be, Google Chrome, sorry. We will be releasing on Firefox pretty soon, so that's pretty exciting.
Cool. Super exciting.
We had actually, a little segue, a conversation going on where people are also really important and value what their browser is. Mm-hmm. And is a more value-based browser. They care about privacy and open source and all that kind of stuff. So that was a fun discussion to get into and see how people really care about that. But okay, so going back, right now, if you go to our website, www.mytrestle.com, there's a link to allow you to download it, and it'll take you straight to the Chrome store. And essentially, you add it to your browser. It's a plugin that will kind of operate in the background, and you simply create an account. Tell us what your 1 to 3 most important values are. There's 7 that we have listed right now. Install it, finish it, and then log into the button, which what you end up doing is there will be a logo on the upper side of your browser that's a little T. That is your myTrestle button. Everything is stored within that. And you can click on that whenever you want on a website and log in, update your values, and that is where all the information is stored. So when you go to a website that we have analyzed, you'll get a little pop-up. And the pop-up will basically have the company name, a logo of the company, and a compatibility score. And that compatibility score is based off of the 1 to 3 values that you chose. And so based off of all of the operations of the company, we've gone through and we say, based on what you care about, this is how good this company is to you. And then you can choose to read more and see all of their practices. And then that digging deeper into the source of what Jennifer was talking about is all available to you, but only if you want it and when you want it.
And so if I had, first, for the record, I selected like all 7 because all 7 are really important to me. But no, I did select all 7. But let's say that I hadn't. Would I be able to see like, okay, this one matches all of the sustainable, but maybe I'm curious about like, okay, but are they fair trade? Is there a way to easily access that without having, how does that work?
Yeah, so this is something that we tested before finalizing the product. And we found that people, while they may have a couple of top priorities of values, they're still curious about the other ones. So the myTrestle score, the compatibility score that you see, which is out of 5 hearts, is relative to the values that you chose. Mm-hmm. But we will always display the information on all the practices of the data that we have. So even if you didn't choose cruelty-free as one of your most important values, you'll still see the information. Mm-hmm. Especially, we found this useful for people when they switch from one product category to another. So in apparel, you may be really keen on sustainable practices and fair labor practices. When you switch into beauty, you may be more concerned with cruelty-free and natural ingredients. So it may not always perfectly translate across product categories. So we want to provide the information right away anyways. Mm-hmm. But we've also made it so that you can change your values at any point in time too. So and it will recalculate that score for you. So if you are going to go search for a beauty product and you know you want to focus on a set of values specifically, you can always change and then go do your search that way.
That's awesome. That's
really,
really cool.
Reflect the values the most recent set of values that you chose.
Awesome. Explain to me, like, okay, I'm just playing the dumb question here. I obviously understand why I'm asking you this question, but explain why it was important to you guys to have like all the different values. And I think that's something we talked about before. Like everyone has different ethics, everyone has different standards, different values. So why was that something you guys, when you were developing this, that you thought, okay, we absolutely have to have all the following? What was the mindset that went into developing and helping you choose the values that you guys selected?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So first of all, the values that we have on there are not the entire spectrum of how a human thinks. So there are plenty of values that we are still hoping to add in the future that we're hoping to explore. The reason we chose the 7 that we have is because when we did an analysis of the conversations people were having and the data that we were seeing, what business was talking about, what consumers were talking about, These are the 7 that really seemed to align. Well, 6 of them. And then we added transparency, because in order for us to do our jobs, we need businesses to practice transparency. Mm-hmm. We find that a lot of consumers choose transparency as one of the important values. Mm-hmm. So the reason we chose those is because we did a little research around the current discourse that's going on and the overlap between what businesses were putting efforts into and what consumers were starting to really say that they cared about. These were the ones that rose to the top.
Great. And can you just list off what six values you guys have right now listed?
Oh, you're going to test me, aren't you?
I'm just curious, just so anyone wondering. It's like...
absolutely. Right now, we're analyzing companies primarily on their environmental practices, their labor practices, animal practices, the social impact that they do. And that includes things like giving back to communities, donating, the makeup of their leadership board, if they include women-owned businesses. So that one's that's a pretty broad category, social impact. It also includes natural ingredients or materials. It also includes
cruelty-free.
Locally made, which right now is
locally made.
USA made at this point in time.
Local, I'm sorry, what did you say? Local USA, is that what you said?
At this point in time, it represents only USA made. But we hope to, in the future, be able to make that available, local made to anybody wherever they are.
Cool.
More specific to like a geolocation.
Yeah.
You can a range of what you consider local to you. So
that's cool.
For all the international people, we're sorry we don't have local in anything outside of the US yet. But
it'll come.
You got to start somewhere.
Exactly.
Yep. So that's where we're focused right now. And we're already hearing some questions around things that people really care about. Like sometimes you want to support a woman-owned business. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you want to, support, or in a lot of times you want to not support businesses who have certain practices as well. So that's not as well taken into account in our tool yet, but we're working on figuring out how to balance that with the good things companies are doing.
Yeah. Hey, just really quickly, I think someone's email is open, and it's is it open on your end by any chance?
Is it yours?
Is that new signups? I hope it is.
I hope you guys aren't bombarded, by the way. I literally yesterday went through, I was like, I want to know about this brand. I want to know about this brand. I want to know about this brand. Actually, we'll just jump right in. So how does it work? There are 2 things. That is, you just mentioned what brands don't do. And I think that's something, when I was looking yesterday, I absolutely don't want to support brands that do X, Y, or Z, or that use palm oil, or that, X, Y, or Z. And I was wondering, I was going to ask you guys, is that something that you've been thinking about?
Yeah, for sure. Something that we hear a lot from people. We've started with the good things that companies are doing. We really want to highlight the positive practices and the movement, because our definition of status quo of business is that and how it's been operating for a very long time, is that the whole purpose of business is to increase shareholder value at whatever cost. And so for us, the businesses that are choosing to, even at the expense of their own bottom line sometimes, do practices above and beyond traditional standards and ethics, then we want to celebrate that. So we started with highlighting the positive things that companies are doing and really wanting to share that with consumers so they can understand the movement towards more ethical business practices. But that's not to say that just because a business has some really positive movement, that they're not also operating in ways that a consumer would absolutely not want to support. So absolutely, we're thinking about it. We still have to figure out the best way to incorporate that information, the best way to track that information.
Yeah.
The current best practice is media goes in and does an expose, and that's consumers' best chances at learning some of the negative side of business. So it's not as well developed on that side, but that's something that we're still challenged with, for sure. It's something we're still thinking about, and we're figuring out how to incorporate that aspect, especially when it's something very specific, like I don't want to use palm oil, or I definitely don't want to support child labor, or things specific like that. Then it's maybe a little bit easier, but even still, it'll be a challenge. So if anyone has really brilliant suggestions, feedback.
It's always fun challenges to have. And also, in addition to the negatives and really being aware of that and being able to avoid that, a thing that we've heard a lot is the ability to rate. So kind of say, hey, I care mostly about cruelty-free. And then second is environment. But like, at what rate do you care more or less,
right.
or what are the priorities of each value to you? So like in your case, you selected all 7 values because you do care about them. But at some point, there's going to be a higher priority for a certain value set. So it's like, how can we then,
right.
The systems and the algorithms to, bring out the best possible match for you.
Which is not a current feature.
No.
Let me just clarify that the current weighting system weights all of the values equally. But if people are interested, that's a feature that we're thinking about incorporating, which is something that we've heard a little bit. People would like to be able to weight their values.
Weight their values, like if it's okay, environmental would be like a 10, cruelty-free would be like a 4, like whatever that is, and then you would rate it that way. Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's really important because there are cases in which some of the values just are at odds with each other.
Right.
Some of my favorite research to do is in the comments section of a Patagonia ad on social media, because that's one space where I get to see the conversation around values, and you'll see it very clearly. So you'll have somebody, for example, I was looking at a down jacket, and some people just are beside themselves that down was used to begin with, because down comes from a traditionally heinous industry of live plucking. And even if it's certified, even if it's recycled or certified ethically treated down, it's still not within their value set, if they have a vegan perspective especially. On the other hand, I'll see people talking about, well, it's recycled, first of all, and secondly, the alternative is synthetic materials, which are harsh on the environment. So it's one of those cases where the two value sets are genuinely at odds with each other,
right.
And there's not a perfect solution yet. And so in that case, it might be really helpful for someone to be able to weight that this particular value set, this particular value point is more important to me. And then after that, I really would like to consider something like environmental, whatever it is,
Yeah. I think it's important to point out too that it is hard to be 100% sustainable all the time, especially for a business. I will say, like you said, the point of business is, to increase shareholder or to make a profit. So, it's like they're torn. And so I want to do a shout out to all the businesses out there that are at least trying. I do realize like it's not easy. I want to also recognize that, to be able to track your supply chain from the beginning to the end is not always convenient. So for companies such as Patagonia, another one that I love is Tony's Chocolonely. They do all fair trade, child-free chocolate labor. Like you realize like the amount of work that has to go into something like that. You have to be really dedicated, and sometimes at the expense of making a profit, like you had mentioned. So I think it's really important for people to realize, like, as much as we all want to be pointing fingers at like this brand isn't good or that brand isn't good, like there is something to be said about that brand is trying. Like, give them a break. I'm not saying that I'm going to support brands that are trying hard enough, like, hello people, like you realize. So that's just something I wanted to point out. And I think you're muted right now.
Really?
Oh, no, there you go. Okay. Sorry, you were saying sure and like nothing was coming out of your mouth. Sorry.
Just whispering. I'm glad the technology hasn't failed us.
So yeah, I just wanted to point that out.
And I think that's something that we hold very strongly as well. It's worth knowing that our generation, the millennials, like you said, are the first ones to really start to ask questions and really want that information. And the generation before us are the ones that are leading the businesses. Mm-hmm. So, and they didn't come from the background of asking those questions. That wasn't a part of the way that they operated in the world, and they're having to adapt. And their history is, they take pride in doing good business that provides jobs for people, that makes money, and they've mastered it. They figured it out. Starting a business itself is very challenging. Mm-hmm. Owning a business is itself very challenging, like you said. And then to add on this new generation that has come up and is really like critical in the way that they doing the operations. They've never had to ever had to open up their doors and invite the public into their private operations on how something's being made. And now we're asking them to do that for the first time. So it's worth taking into consideration the historical perspective of the movement of business into this space. And for us, we like to celebrate the ones that are doing incredible work to reduce their waste or their energy consumption or clean up their supply chains and start to ask the questions themselves. Oh, what is our impact? Where are we actually causing more harm than good? The ones that are asking those questions and starting to address them, we celebrate that.
Yeah, I agree. And in a way, you know, you were saying like opening the doors. It's true. They've never had to open their doors. And also I want to say like, well, yeah, but look where it got us, you know, environmentally speaking, I will say in some regards, you know, I think there's both good and bad to that conversation. Because I think for so long we were just consuming. And this goes back to what I was trying to get at before I like word vomited on you guys as we started, but it's just like, we're just consuming, and that's what they're used to, this behavior of making things that are cheap, quick, and most likely environmentally not sustainable. Not environmentally sustainable, I should say. So it's like we all are trying to change the way we think about things, I think. We're all trying to be like, okay, if I have to be a more conscious consumer and the brands that I buy from have to be more conscious providers, like we all have to recalculate and change the way we've been programmed. Since like the 40s, I want to say the 50s and 40s, we've been this like convenience, quick pace, like make it happen fast, big business, making a lot of money, which is great. We want all businesses to make money. I'm not saying I don't think businesses should, you know, profit, but to what expense, you know? So I think all of us from the ground up, bottom down, top down, like we all have to make some changes and rewire our brains almost as to how we're consuming and how we're producing.
Oh, for sure.
And I think also on top of that, what the, you know, our parents' generation through the 80s and 90s really mastered at was this mass production, was bringing down the cost of, you know, goods to something that the average common man can afford.
Right.
You know, provided a lot more, which was great for our society and great for our economy. And it really, you know, put us into a position that, our quality of life really changed. Now we're seeing the results of that cheap product and of access and of that increased lifestyle. And so now we're demanding that, you know, change the practices, but keep the price low. You know, because we've gotten used and we've got addicted to these low prices.
Yeah.
You know, something comes out with a, you know, really eco-friendly, well made in the USA, and it's $40 more than its next product down. And so you understand why it's such a challenge when it really comes down to the price, because we're not willing to, you know, settle to pay our employees less. And, you know, it's that giant mess of a problem, but we're still addicted to the price and we're still addicted to convenience.
For
sure. That takes time to change.
Yeah. And you know, this whole notion of having to recalibrate not just the businesses and how the businesses operate, but us as consumers and how we operate and how we buy. And I'll send this to you, Madeline, so you can share it. There's this really great graphic that shows the transition of how brands have had to, what they've had to do in order to be attractive and competitive to a consumer. So from the 40s, like you said, up until the 2000s or so, the really driving factor for a competitive advantage was reducing price and increasing quality. Those were the two main focuses. Since the 2000s, there's been this huge push towards engagement. We as consumers now need to feel the brand. We have to relate to the brand. We have to feel a connection. We want our souls to be acknowledged as we make a purchase, or especially with the Instagram craze, where brands now have conversations with consumers, can delight their consumers with images and feelings. So since the 2000s, that's been, with the invention of the internet, just before that, that's really been the competitive advantage that a brand can take on. And there's some suspicion that the next kind of economic period will really include trust and transparency, and that we as consumers will be recalibrated again to value trust and transparency. And the ones that will be competitive, the brands that will have the most competitive advantage, will be the ones that are the ones that are forthcoming about their practices, put it out there willingly, clean up some of the inside so that they can show it and be proud of it. And so I'll send you that graph so you can share it. But that's something that we identify that's coming. And in order for that system to work, there has to be a tool that helps us identify. The system has to be in transparency. So that's one of the things that we at Trestle are doing as well, is providing that platform for brands to be transparent.
Right.
Them to have a space to put their documents so that they can share it with the consumer and say, look, this is what we're doing. Here's our policies. Here's our reports. Here's our practices. Here are our audits. Because they're not perfect, but we know that the consumer is going to ask anyways. And we'd rather just put it out than have media show up at our door one day asking questions, which I think is a very valid, it's still going to be a thing. Media is still going to do that, and that's an important role that they play. But in the meantime, we want to create the system that allows and rewards companies for being transparent as we move into that economic period.
Yeah, and I would rather buy from a company that says, like, look, we realize that we're not doing this perfectly, but we're trying, so we still got a ways to go, but we're being transparent with you. And sorry, you mentioned, like, we want to relate to companies. Like, we are such, I don't even know what the word, like a fluffy generation, like, oh, pat my back, I get an award for 4th place, like, we're such babies. Sometimes I'm like so embarrassed and also really proud in some ways because we are trying to make things better. It's just, I could do a whole podcast episode on millennials.
Yeah, we are an interesting generation. We have definitely our ups and downs. People love to hate on the millennials because there is a lot of that. We are a little bit tender and we feel special and like we were told our entire lives, you're special. You could do anything you want. So now we're like, okay, let's go do anything we want. What does that look like? How do we make that happen? Are you going to hand me anything I want? Put it in my hand. There it is.
Yeah.
But yes, with the silliness that comes with the millennial generation, it also comes with a really impressive critical mind that's starting to really go up a lot more.
Yeah, I mean, we're demanding for transparency, and I don't think people were demanding for that before, not to the extent I think that we are. One of the questions that I had for you, and you may or may not be able to answer this and may or may not have thought about this. I watched a documentary called Poverty Inc. Have you heard of this?
We haven't seen it.
Okay. It was on Netflix. I'm not sure if it is. Now, this is like totally convoluted, but it's something that I personally have been giving a lot of thought to, and I was thinking about this for you guys. Tom's shoes. Love them, buy one, give one. Problem, though. When you have a society, and are you guys familiar with this problem? Like, if you are, stop me, and you've probably thought about this. But, okay, for my audience, I'm rambling here, but when you go into a place and you're like, here are all these free shoes for your local communities. Well, the cobbler down the street, the person making the shoes, he or she is now out of business. So that has an alternative effect. As much as it's also providing good, it's also taking away from local economies. And the other thing that I'm super passionate about is empowering local economies that are struggling and I did an interview with Abi Wemimo, who's from Africa, and he's so big on talking about empowering the local communities so that they're not a community of dependence. So that's just something I was thinking, is that something that you guys have thought of? Like, are there different tiers to what's social so broad and environmental so broad? But is that something you guys have thought of? Like, how do you address something like that when you're valuing a company or rating a company, I mean?
Well, let's touch on the rating part of it in just a minute. But we that is something that we include into our social impact perspective. So we both include the gives, the buy one, give one, the donates cash directly, the gives product, but we also include the creates systems in local economies to support the local economy. So if you run into a company that does that, you'll see that show up in the social impact category of the myTrestle button and of our data. And just a really quick example, Tom's does the buy one, give one. Brilliant initial model that we had never seen before.
Right.
We're like, okay, wow, business can do something good. Unintended consequence, however, is the impact on the local economy that those shoes are now being donated to, like you said. On the other hand, there's companies like Soul Rebels. You should go look them up if you haven't heard of them.
Have not,
Definitely use the myTrestle button to look them up, because you'll see that they're out of Ethiopia, and their whole purpose is to create the supply chain directly from well-treated workers in the local economy to the American, especially, and the European economies to provide product. And we haven't seen a lot of that direct to consumer from communities like that. And that's where we can have a really large impact on the social impact side, especially if supporting a local economy, if we are aware of that enough to know that that's maybe a better alternative than maybe a buy one, give one. Buy one, give one's still great. It does good things,
Absolutely.
but does definitely have its unintended consequences.
Yeah.
Check out Soul Rebels as an alternative.
Absolutely will.
Yeah.
And I did mention rating, and I do want you to clarify, you guys don't necessarily rate, you just provide information, correct? Can you talk about that a little bit for the audience?
Yeah, I'm glad you came back to this, because this is something that's really important to clarify. There are organizations out there that do rate companies, that have established an ethical line that they'll rate companies up against. What we do instead is more of a matching algorithm. So based on what you say you care about, because, and this is something you talk about in your podcast quite often, Madeline, we believe, just like you, that ethical is convoluted, that it doesn't mean the same thing to everyone. There are different priorities. We've talked about this a little bit, that each person has a unique value profile. So what is most important to me may look different than what's most important to Carl. So our matching, the score you'll see in the myTrestle button out of 5 hearts is a compatibility score. We kind of like say that we're the match.com of e-commerce, because we show a compatibility score between a company and a consumer that shows that's relevant to your actual values and the practices of that company. So when you look at Soul Rebels and I look at Soul Rebels, we may see a different score based on the values that we put in. So we don't necessarily rate companies, we pull in information on their practices, and then we allow you to see how compatible it is to you and what you care about. Do you want to add anything?
No, I think you said it really well, between the difference of a rating guideline and a threshold that a company has to make versus here's the information and then here's an algorithm that breaks through the information and tells you how good it is for you.
Right.
And that's the difference. So we're not setting that threshold. We're not setting that line. We get to just say, hey, here's all the information, and we've broken it down and quantified it so that you can make a decision based off of that.
And that allows us to not just seek out the most ethical companies. It allows us to pick companies that maybe we're analyzing all companies. In a few years, we hope to have every company in the world on our database and analyzed and all of their information current, because there are some practices in all companies that might be, relatable to us. So, and this too is really interesting as we're analyzing some of the companies that you wouldn't think would be ethical. We're seeing a lot of companies that are doing really great things that aren't talking about it, that aren't sharing those practices with the consumers. And for the first time, somebody else is coming in and saying, hey, maybe we should actually really be looking at what you're doing, because you're doing more than you've ever told the world you're doing. Right. And that's worth acknowledging. So that's a lot of the things as to why we haven't set an ethical standard. First of all, we don't believe we're qualified to set an ethical standard. We're consumers too, and we have a couple values that we care about most. And so we wanted to provide something similar that we could use that could connect with us and to everybody else in that same way.
Yeah, I love that. That's so true. I'm glad that we are talking like that. You brought that up, because I think like, okay, I really don't like Burger King because I don't like fast food. But I will say the other day when we were driving cross country, I ordered a Beyond Burger from this local restaurant, and they said that they actually they don't have anymore because Burger King just bought them all up, because now Burger King is going to be providing I think it's the Impossible Burger actually. So like that's like, see, like even Burger King is trying, or like Starbucks trying to reduce like the straws, like little things like that. I think it's really, I think one of the things that I really want you guys listening to walk away with is they're not just rating, like Trestle doesn't just rate ethical, sustainable brands. You're doing all of the brands. And that's what I love, because if you think like, oh, your mascara company or whatever is like the best, you know, since sliced bread, and you find out through the Trestle button that actually a lot of it doesn't match your values, you know, unless you were like me and you were doing research, it's going to open up, it's going to take the guesswork out. And that's what I love about what you guys are doing.
Right. I think it's just important to have the information. So,
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you love a brand, at least have the information on that brand. And you can still continue to support them, even if they're not perfectly aligned with your values. Perhaps they make the best product for you. So that's an important, you know, factor to take in. It's just at least you'll have the information on what's going on behind that product. And then you can use that to make decisions, or you don't have to. One of the features that we've included in this first version is that when you land on a company's page or a product of theirs on Amazon and we haven't analyzed them, we're not going to pop up because we don't want to annoy you. But if you did click our the myTrestle button icon in your browser, it'll pop up an option for you to suggest a brand to be analyzed. So one of the cool things that we've gotten to see as we have launched this is the brands that people care about and the ones that they're really curious about. So we're getting some really interesting information on where people want transparency and what brands people are starting to demand transparency from.
Which ones have surprised you the most?
As far as those suggestions? Go ahead.
I think some of the repeats that I've seen, the first one was Target has been multiple times. So we'll have to hop on that.
Yeah.
I was curious about that. Like Target, Bed Bath & Beyond, just some of the larger brands like REI even. Like they have multiple brands under them. They're not just one specific. How do you go about researching that? You know, Target has they have, you know, so many different things. How does one even go about, or do you just focus on the headquarters of Target?
Well, so it's a really good question, and it's a really important question because let's use REI, for example, because we have analyzed REI. So what we do is look at the practices of the actual company. So of REI, how do they do things? And they're a really great company, actually. We were really pleased when we analyzed them. And then within REI, they have a lot of brands that are also represented in their stores and online. Patagonia, Arc'teryx, we analyze them individually. So we'll both analyze the marketplace, which in this case is REI. They also have a brand, so they produce products as well. So it's a little complicated, but they have a supply chain that can be analyzed as well. So where Target maybe doesn't as much. So it's interesting because you can analyze at the marketplace level, and then all the brands that they hold, and you could just keep going. Really, it's complicated, but. Target itself, for example, Target itself has its own practices that are separate from the brands that it represents.
Okay.
And so we would analyze actually the brand of Target.
Got it.
We would do the brand of Target and brands within that. And so we're able, just like we do on Amazon, we're able to go within a marketplace and see what that brand that you're currently looking at is. And so, you know, we'll be able to expand that out to other marketplaces like Target or Walmart or, you know, Bed Bath & Beyond. And if we have information on a specific brand that you're looking at within that site, give you the information on that brand as well.
Right.
That's so great. Well, I want to shift gears a little bit because I love talking to you guys, and I feel like we could talk about this issue forever, but I do want to shift gears a little bit to the entrepreneurial journey a little bit, because I want to bring everyone here listening, including myself, to the behind the scenes. Right now, it's just you, Jennifer and Carl, correct? So the two co-founders, and you have one person helping you with the tech part. Is that accurate?
We actually do have a team. So we have a technical advisor who has definitely stepped up and built a lot of it, which has been brilliant. We'll give him some credit for that. His name's Demola. And we also have a social media management team that we work with who does a brilliant job on our Instagram. So she gets our voice, she gets what we're trying to accomplish, and she does a beautiful job. And we just go ahead.
Yeah, we just brought on a couple of smaller developers now, and we're dating the development side, so trying to bring on more of that capability for us to expand and grow.
That's so exciting. So the thing is, it's a lot of effing work. Not only is the research, you guys, so explain to us a little bit how you guys are finding all of this information. You know, where are you getting the information? What are you looking for? Where are you pulling from, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? It probably takes hours, I imagine, because I know it takes me hours. So paint us a picture of what your life looks like when you're doing this.
Well, it's probably very similar to the process that you would take if you were really dedicated to finding all the information on this company. So we do online searches. We start with we start with the company. We see what they say about themselves on their website. We look at their reports. We look at if they have audit reports. We look at those. And then we see if they have any certifications. And we pull in that information. So we really pull from third-party auditors and certification boards, because they've already done a lot of the work. So we start there and then pull in information from the company based on if they can demonstrate it with either documentation or if it's a claim that they make that, if proven wrong, would breach false advertising laws. So that's kind of our standard for what kind of information we bring in. But on average, it takes about, I know you can't give a range when you give an average. I'm just realizing that now. It takes about 2 to 4 hours per company on average. For companies that have no information, it's about 30 minutes. Uh-huh. Do literally nothing but sell product, about 30 minutes to figure that out. Mm-hmm. But if they do have information, if there is info out there, it's about 2 to 4 hours per company. And
admittedly so, I'm having this be done by hand. There's, number one, it takes a lot of time. And so it's our brain power us being taken away from other things that we could be doing. But also, there's human error. There's things that we miss. There's individual translations that for, one person, you might see something different than another person. So with that, I think the caveat has to say we are as extensive as we can be right now. And it's not perfect yet, and we're just getting better and better and better with it. So the next goal is to take essentially our script that we run through on a company and create systems to make that faster, quicker, and more accurate as well.
When you say script, are you talking about like coding, like something like that, where you behind the scenes you could analyze something?
No,
okay. Or is that, because that would be like amazing if you could like plug in something and go through like their website, like here are keywords, like.
That is a thing, and we've thought about automating that process, and we might actually build a script to do that as a starting point, because you just get something to piece out the information for us, and then we quantify it. That would probably turn 2 to 4 hours into 1 hour per company. But I think we mean like the process that we go through when we analyze a company, and we're creating the system so that not only can we automate parts of it, but we can also share that responsibility, bring more people on who have an interest in this topic and want to be analyzing companies as well. So that's part of some of our next steps, I think.
Yeah. That'd be really cool. That's something I know a lot of people who already would be have done the research themselves, and so would be willing to. But anyway, so going back to your entrepreneurial journey. So take us to the moment. I would love for you guys, if you don't mind sharing. You guys are together, correct? Is that something you're open to sharing?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So I'd love for you guys to explain a little bit, when I meet a couple co-founders, if you will, how you guys met and what was the moment where you guys decided this is what we're doing. Let's do this. Did it start off as Trestle? How did that come about? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Fortunately, it was not, let's start a business together. Oh, maybe we should date too. we were dating because, and the way we met was we both swiped right and we met online. And our first date was
it does work.
Terrible mac and cheese.
Really?
But we survived.
Yeah.
What, did you make it, Carl? Did you make mac and cheese or something?
No, I'm good at making mac and cheese.
Oh.
Portland is actually known for very good mac and cheese. And so we were both excited about it. We had different options, but we ended up settling to this other restaurant that isn't known for mac and cheese. And we're like, all right, they have mac and cheese. Let's try it. and it was rough. Yeah, I think we had a couple bites. That was it.
Moved on with our lives.
Yeah.
But no, we were actually dating for about 4 months when we went on a hike to Ramona Falls. If you're familiar with the Oregon area, it's stunning. And we were just talking about what we think the world's going to look like in 20 years. My background is I've worked for both government and nonprofit. And I've been project manager in across the public health sector and the workforce sectors. So that's where I'm coming from. And in both of those spaces, I could see how both industries were really desperate for for-profit business to play a significantly larger role in solving social issues. They were always trying to invite business to be on boards, be part of conversations. And they do to the degree that they can, but it's almost like we've been separated. Government and nonprofit solve social issues. For-profit makes money, and that's how our societies looked. And so for me, I was just like, what is it going to look like when for-profit actually does play a stronger role in solving social issues and environmental issues? What does the world have to look like in order for that to be the case? And I think that we were just talking about that on a hike one day, and we just had this vision where in the future 100% of for-profit businesses do more than just earn a profit, but significantly address and help solve social issues, and they'll be invited through a system that incentivizes them to do so. And what we saw at that point in time was there was no system to incentivize them or even really significantly invite them to the table. So we just kind of started from that hike on, thinking about what that would look like. What systems have to be in place? What does incentivization look like? What do consumers need to do? What do businesses need to do? What role do other organizations play? And so from that conversation, and that was about 2 years ago, from that conversation, we just kind of started building on top of it and getting a clear idea of what this thing needs to be in order to meaningfully invite business to the table of solving social issues.
Yeah, I mean, it started with the question and the freedom to be able to say, hey, look, this is a problem that maybe we can try to figure out. There's definitely a big step from an idea, a concept, a conversation, and starting a business. And that leap just kind of happened over time. It was gradual, where we were just asking questions out to our friends, taking polls, taking it seriously like we are starting a business from day one, from the idea of being like, there's actually something here and there is a possibility that this could turn into something. But it was just a giant hypothesis and a giant question that we had. Is this a problem that can be solved? Is it actually feasible? And we just kept prodding and poking around and surveyed our family and friends, and eventually kind of bumped around into, now we have a business that just launched a product. So, it's just been kind of a tumble of a journey, which is pretty fun. Intentional tumble,
And what?
Intentional tumble.
Yeah.
Reaching out into the community and getting the resources that Portland has for startups, for building a business, and kind of wrapping around this framework of our idea. And it's matured from there.
Yeah, the way that we think about it is there is a perfect way that this thing can look. It's our job to discover and figure out what that thing needs to look like. So a big part of the way we see our role is discovery and allowing it to almost present itself to us based on how the market responds, what the technology can do, how business responds, and allowing all the forces at play to really shape this thing so it can be the most meaningful for the most amount of people.
Where was that moment where you guys took it from the idea and developed it into what is now Trestle? Like, I love going to that moment where when did you decide, let's make this an LLC? I'm assuming you have an LLC. I'm not sure if you do, but was there take us to the specific moment, or was there a specific moment, or was it, Carl, you did say it was kind of gradual, but was there a moment where you're like, no, let's do this?
I think the moment that it became real for us was there was an invite that we had to go to a new venture conference that was put on by the University of Oregon is up in Portland. And they had, booths of all the different accelerators and different kind of company and startup resources in Portland. I wasn't able to go to it because I was up in a job in Washington, but Jennifer went to it. And one of her superpowers is connecting with people and networking, and absolutely killed it and got a scholarship into, it's called TIE, which is the Indus Entrepreneurs, which is a huge organization, but they have a chapter in Portland, and they had a business startup boot camp that she got a scholarship into. And so we got to go through, twice a week for 2 months, I believe, and really build out a business plan and a business idea. And it was after that we're like, we got it. This is our vision now, and this is where we want to go.
Yep.
And where does the name Trestle, like myTrestle, come from? How did you guys come up with that? I was curious.
There's a couple things to this. So just to clarify, Trestle is the name of the company. The myTrestle button is the name of the tool that we just launched. But Trestle is an architectural structure. It has like a 3. So it means if you have a trestle stool, it means it has 3 legs. If it's a trestle bridge, it's based on a triangle structure, and it's one of the most sound structures in architecture. And so we chose that word for a couple of reasons. One, because we see ourselves playing a really structural role in society, is creating the foundation on which a lot of other things will be built on top of. So we wanted something very strong that represents infrastructure. And then secondly, we were on a drive back from Washington down to Oregon, and we were crossing the Columbia River. And we were like, let's think about bridge names. Let's look at a bridge name. We come from the city of bridges, Portland. So maybe there's some nod back to the city that we're from that we can bring into this. And then thirdly, I always like to say this, I don't know if Carl loves it as much, but if you spell Tesla wrong when you're doing a search, maybe you'll land on us.
And for me, my little fun part about it is, like, it sounds random enough that it could become a verb.
Yeah.
It's not yeah, it's a weird word.
I've already started, you have trestled it, but trestled, did you trestle that? I think absolutely. I love it. I was curious. That's actually a good story. I love it. Is there anything that you would like to discuss that I haven't asked you yet before we keep moving on?
Yes. And I think one of the messages we want to get out is this is really just the beginning for how we envision this thing. And we want to invite people to come along on the journey with us. So we're not saying don't expect perfection. We're saying understand that we're just trying to create a system that's never existed before. So feel free to use it, try it out, give feedback back to us on how we can make it meaningful for you. But stay along for the journey. So even if you find something that maybe is frustrating, or you run into companies that we haven't analyzed and that frustrates you, I understand it completely. We've analyzed around 200 companies to date, which is not a ton, given there are millions of brands out there. So I would just say stay with us during this journey while we map this out, figure it out, and always participate. We're open to connecting. We're open to receiving emails, but probably the best way to interact with us and help your voice be heard and what this can look like is on Instagram.
Very cool. What would you say is the biggest challenge that you faced up to date, actually? That was something, because it's hard. What you guys are doing is hard. Not only is there the research component to this, but then there's a technical component. I can only imagine the kind of headache this causes you on a daily basis.
The biggest challenge that we have is Jennifer and I are full-time on this. We don't have a second job at this point. Well, we actually have multiple things that bring in money, but that has been the biggest challenge of the year is how do we, without a large investment, because we're completely bootstrapped to date, how do we build a giant vision, and how do we ourselves survive and not kill ourselves as we're trying to build a business? I don't have a rich uncle who can just drop down $1 million to get this started, right? So how do we do that? And so it's been a process throughout this year of learning, number one, how to get this business idea off the ground, grow it, as well as get our life put together financially so that we can pay the bills. And we've, at least the last couple of months, we've been okay.
We figured out a system.
Yeah. And so I think that that's been the biggest challenge, is like not just the longevity of the business, but the longevity of ourselves, so that we can build this business and not be dependent on, having to raise money right away when we're not ready for it, or accepting money from somebody who might not be right, or, whatever the things are that could taint our vision of what we want to do. That's been a challenge.
Yeah. Can I add something?
Yeah.
So you said that there are the two challenges you raised: the research, the amount of time it takes to research, and having to learn the system of how you quantify data that's not ever been quantified before. And then there's the technical side. And neither Carl nor I are technical founders, so we're really desperate for people who have technical skills to be part of our team. I just want to say that I'm really impressed with the people who have shown up for us, because we're not paying anybody, and there's an entire team that's making this thing real, and it's amazing. So first of all, they understand the vision and they get behind it, and they're willing to put their time and their talents into this. And I just wanted to take a minute to acknowledge that people are going out of their way for this, and it's really beautiful.
Well, I think it's important, and I think I'm happy to hear that people are backing you behind this, because I do think there's a need for this. Even before chatting today, I was doing a little bit just to get a few stats and everything, and almost every single article that ended with like millennials want to be sustainable and ethical ended with, but they don't have time, it's too expensive, or they don't have the motivation. And that's what you guys do. Minus the fact that you're giving money to people to buy expensive products, you are providing the research so that if you don't have motivation, it's there, and you're taking the time out. And I think that right there is such a valuable service to conscious consumers. Right. I know it would be so great, at some day to be able to be like, oh, this brand, should I promote them? Should I not promote them? I don't know. Let me Trestle it. Let me see. Click the little T, boom. And everything's there. Then all I have to do is research it, pull out the facts, and then write or do a video or whatever it is that, I would do.
I'm glad you mentioned motivation, because that's one of the things that I think that we are really focused on, where maybe others aren't as much. We identify as common consumers, not conscious consumers. Before this, we were not the type of people to go out and research a brand beforehand. We just wanted to be as lazy as possible, have it conveniently provided for us so that we could accidentally put our money towards brands that were doing good things in the world.
Right.
So a big part of the way that we've designed this is for people who think like us, who at one point in their lives want to say, yeah, it'd be really great if maybe my dollars did mean a little bit more than what they have in the past. And they could, in less than 10 seconds, install the browser extension and move on with their lives.
Right.
And the benefit is that it goes with you. So whether you're on a company's website or you find a product of theirs on Amazon, it's there with you. So we're not asking you, hey, don't choose to go to this company, come to us instead. We're not necessarily creating a marketplace. What we're doing is, wherever you're actually looking for products, we want it to be available to you. And we have it pop up so that it can be a reminder, because you're not thinking about it all the time. And I think the motivation aspect's really important. So even if in just one moment you have a little bit of an ink, you want to be a little more conscious, this might be a really good tool for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I do love the pop-up feature, by the way, because I was looking at something and I didn't know and or was paying attention to Trestle, and all of a sudden, boop, it popped up, and I was like, nice. Yeah, I love that little feature. Absolutely. We're already past an hour, so I don't want to I know you guys are busy entrepreneurs and everything. I don't want to keep you much longer, but this has been really wonderful. I really appreciate it. And I absolutely think that in a year we should follow up and kind of do where you come, because I think it's always interesting. You guys are way at the beginning, and I think I invited you on this because I think the topic you're trying to solve, the issue you're trying not solve, but to simplify, if you will, the convenience issue and making it easier is such an important thing to discuss. And for people to be aware that you guys are doing this, because I think it's going to make a huge difference. So I'll be really interested to see like where you guys are in about a year or two, you know.
Yeah.
So it's been really great. So with that being said, you guys, I'm going to let you go on your busy days. Oh, wait, last thing. How can we connect with you?
Yes. Okay. Well, if you're interested in adding the myTrestle button, that's super easy. Go to our website at www.mytrestle.com. Trestle is spelled with a T, so Trestle. And you can also connect with us by following our Instagram, which is at The True Story of Trestle. And then secondly, feel free to email us. I'm Jennifer at mytrestle.com. Carl is Carl at mytrestle.com.
Carl with a C.
Yes. Jennifer with a J. Those are probably the best methods, and we're pretty responsive.
Awesome. Actually, one little fun fact at the end, Carl, we need to talk about your toilet plunger.
Brought one to show her.
We should have, yeah.
And you guys, I'm not making this crap up. Literally, I'd love for you to share this behind, because it's so, I mean, I have like a 2-year-old sense of humor, but it is awesome. I kind of wanted you to share that before I let you go.
Sure. Well, before I went into building an ethical business, I had an idea. So my background is actually in film production and entrepreneurism. So I got a business degree in entrepreneurism. But I had this random idea of a toilet plunger that looked like the smiling pile of poo emoji. And looked around, realized that it didn't exist, and I was like, ding, there's a thought. And so I, spent about 2 years to go out and get IP and sales and build it and overseas manufacturing. And I brought to life the poo plunger, which is the first ever toilet plunger that looks like the smiling pile of poo emoji. So
the happiest plunger in the world.
Number one problem to your number one solution to your number 2 problem.
Where can we buy this? Is it out on the market yet?
Yeah, so I ended up licensing it to Squatty Potty. And so they have it in their lineup. They took it out to, Kroger's, and I think it's in Walmart Canada. So Fred Meyer's, Ace Hardware's, and it's out in some big box stores. So keep an eye out for it.
Oh my gosh.
It as well, and on Amazon.
And on Amazon.
I was telling my husband about it, and he was like, really? And I was like, yeah, we should totally get one.
I'll have to send some of mine.
Oh my gosh, so funny. Anyway, this has been really great, you guys. And honestly, I really could sit here and talk to you for probably another hour, but I know you have other things to do. So we will just follow up whenever, the time is right, and continue sharing your story. So thank you so much for sharing everything, and good luck with everything you're working on. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Madeline. It's been really nice to be able to share some of the depths of the story that come behind this. So thank you for that opportunity.
Absolutely.
It's been really
good. I appreciate it. Yeah, this was fun. This was really good and really meaningful, because I think it's an important issue to talk about. So, well, thank you so much, guys. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right, awesome.
Bye.